What's up guys, today I'm going to review a bunch of video games, so let's get straight into it with Super Mario Maker 2. So Super Mario Maker 2, of course, the sequel to Super Mario Maker. It's got a campaign in there, but it's also got the Creator Studio stuff in there as well. I haven't really touched the Creator stuff, so I can't comment on that. The campaign is about 100 levels of Mario, classic Mario style levels, but a few twists and turns in here and there. They've upped the challenge in certain areas, very creative stuff. I like how they've got different worlds, so you've got like Super Mario Bros. 1, 2 and 3, then you got 3D World and so on. So every level has like a different look and feel to it. And of course this is the core Mario gameplay. This is the core Mario gameplay at its best, in that it is a 2D platformer. If you've played a Mario 2D platformer or any 2D platformer, you know exactly what you're going to get from here. So you're jumping around on enemies, avoiding objects and so on, trying to get from one end to the other. Simple stuff. And I like how it adds in a few twists and turns. So you've got like claws hanging down, you've got to swing from left and right. Sometimes you've got like a car that you've got to use to get across platforms or whatever. There's tons of creativity, tons of variety in there. The core campaign, the problem with the core campaign is the story. The story is like non-existent. All you're really doing is some stupid dog jumped on a button, which then destroyed Peach's castle somehow. So now you've got to rebuild the castle by doing levels to get the money to rebuild it. And that's it. That's all the story is. Every now and then there'll be like a mission where, oh, someone's been kidnapped, you've got to rescue them. That's kind of all the story is. And then at the end of the story actually still goes on after you finished it, which is weird. But the rewards for continuing it are not really there. You get like a bunch of new like design stuff, but it's all goofy stuff really. But yeah, the levels are great, the story isn't. But this is essentially the Mario game that never ends, because you've got all the creator stuff in there, because you've got the user created content. And again, I haven't touched that. I haven't created any levels. I have played a couple, but I haven't actually went in there and created stuff of my own, because that's not really what I want to do in a game. I want to play games, I don't want to make them. So the fact that you can go in here, get tons and tons of replayability, is just brilliant. And I think in the main campaign, these are some of the best Mario levels ever made. So well designed and so smart and creative at times. The things that they've added in there from previous games, but also just new to this game, are fascinating and they work so well. This, I would say, is probably one of the best platformers ever made. It's one of the best games this year, I would say, as well. It's just a shame that the story isn't great. And I think there's room for improvement as well. I think there is room in there to do DLC, like add new worlds in there, add new Mario game designs in there. Hasn't happened yet, but there is room for it. And I'm wondering if it is going to happen at all now, because I think the game didn't sell quite as well as they expected or wanted it to. But anyway, Super Mario Maker 2, great game. Ding Dong XL. So Ding Dong XL is essentially a kind of a reimagining of like Pong. So Pong, if you remember, is two paddles on either side. You've got to move up and down, you're playing against someone and you're bouncing the ball back and forth. Well, this is essentially Pong, but you're playing with yourself. And what's happening is you're on the bottom, you need to shoot your ball up to the top and then back. Just keep going back and forth. Every time you do it, you get a point. Of course, it's not as easy as that. There are objects flying in between. You can get little power-ups which either speed things up, slow things down, destroy things and so on. And of course, every now and then you might end up, your thing might move along, so it's not quite as simple as it seems. And the longer you wait to shoot your ball up to the other side, the bigger it gets, the harder it is to avoid the objects. The speed also increases, great soundtrack, great score. It's a very simplistic game, very cheap game as well. This is a game that anyone can pick up and play. I think I got it for like 80p or something like that. Incredibly cheap. And I do recommend it. It's a good, fun little game. And yeah, not much more to say about it than that. It's exactly what it is. You shoot from one end to the other repeatedly. It's got great replay value, a bunch of unlocks, different icons you can get. If you're a follower of like IGN or Kinda Funny or something, this is a must play game, I'd say, because you can actually change what the ball looks like, and you can use their logos and so on, so that's pretty cool. Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is a Metroidvania kind of game where You are basically a bug living in this like insect world. Everything's like black and white and noirish, very stylish kind of look to it. The problem is I don't like Metroidvanias. So I played this game, gave it a good shot. I just felt it was really repetitive. So I was going through levels, avoiding the enemies, finding all like the coins and stuff, but then it was really tedious trying to get everything that I collected back to where I needed to save. The fact that there are only so many like fast travel points and save points was annoying to me. And it's not the most easy game either as well. It's one of these games where you get upgrades as you go along, which means that at first it can be tough depending on where you're going. You've got to be really smart of what you're doing and how you're playing it. And as you go further along, you get upgrades like different weapons and power-ups and so on that make it much easier to get to certain areas. But it's a huge game, big world. Half of it I didn't even discover, but if you like Metroidvanias, this is a really good one. It's just something that didn't really click with me. But the actual world, the design of it, the story of it is quite good. Gears 5. Gears 5 is one of my games of the year. Brilliant. I'm a big fan of Gears of War. I think this is probably the best Gears of War game there's been, to be honest. So, haven't really touched too much of the multiplayer stuff, but I played the entirety of the campaign. The campaign continues on from the events of Gears 4. This time you play as Kate, and you're basically trying to find out what's her origins. At the end of Gears 4, it was revealed that she's the granddaughter of the Locust Queen. But how does that work exactly? And I don't want to go into spoilers here, but the campaign I think is great. It starts off, the first chapter of the campaign is very typical Gears game. Obviously the final chapter is very typical Gears game as well. But the story I think is fascinating and interesting. It does a good job of developing characters, it introduces new characters like Fars, and everyone feels really fully developed. They feel like they've got a connection with one another. It feels like a real living, breathing world. And some of the revelations in the story are really mind-blowing stuff. They're things that I never even questioned, but it's like, yeah, of course that's really cool and fascinating and interesting. It changes your whole opinion and look on the past Gears games as well. So yeah, I don't want to go into spoilers, but it links in with events from Gears 4 with these new characters, this new ongoing franchise, but also with Gears 2 for example. There are callbacks to that game and events in that game which are really well done. But where this game really shines is in its gameplay. It's got that classic Gears gameplay, which you're ducking behind cover, shooting the enemies, jumping over and so on. You got the chainsaw weapons and stuff. Every weapon in this game feels like it's got a different style and approach to it. So one weapon might not be my cup of tea, but it could be totally someone else's. And that means that everyone who plays this game is probably going to have a different play style. You might be more of a sniper, hanging back, looking down scopes, shooting people in the head. You might be more of a get in their face, getting gritty with the chainsaw or the shotgun. Or maybe you're somewhere in between where you're using the M-bar and the Lancer. So I like how the game tailors to different playstyles. It's brilliant that way on. This game also introduces some stealth elements where there are enemies who are stood still, who are in some sort of I want to say a stasis kind of thing where they've got nothing to do. So you have to sneak around there. You don't have to. You can totally go in guns blazing. But there's the option of sneaking around there and attacking them from behind and disabling them. And the stealth works really well. I do think there's a bit more that could be in there. So maybe that's something to explore further in the future. But this is an action game at its core, so the stealth is just an optional add-on. But the biggest change in this Gears game is the open world elements. There are two open world elements. One is an icy, snowy location, the other is a desert. And both of them feel large enough to warrant being an open world. Both of them have different looks and aesthetics and feels to them as well. But where this really works is that you get a vehicle this time around. They've done vehicles in the past, there's the motorbikes in the last one, and then in the first Gears of War game there's a tank truck vehicle that you can drive. So this is the one where I think they've really nailed it. The skiff feels like it's got some weight behind it. It feels like when you're turning and skidding on the ice or whatever, that it's very responsive. It feels very natural. If you go over a jump, this thing is not meant to go over jumps, so you feel it like a thud, and that's obviously partly due to the vibration and controller and so on. But a skiff, a really good vehicle. You can store weapons on there. There's 2 positions you can play. I play this in single player, so I don't really know what the second position is. So one person is at the back directing and guiding it and driving it basically, where another person is on like some sort of like scope weapon thing. But yeah, I don't really know what that is because I played it in single player. I think that's mainly just there to like scout locations to look ahead and tag things or something, but I don't know. But it's fun to drive the vehicle, it's fun to explore these locations, and it's not just like the past Gears game where it's like, right, here's where you start, go do your objective over there. There are side missions and side quests in this one, and each one feels different from the other. There are some that are small, where it is just go here, clear out these enemies, get the item, leave. And then there are other ones where it feels like this is a big, chunky, substantial mission. So one, for example, without going into too many spoilers or details, one heads to a space, like, what's the word, like a space station, but obviously not one in space on the ground. So like a space launch platform thing, where they train astronauts. So you go there, and it feels like this is a big, like, chunky mission of the game. Like, they couldn't fit this into the main campaign, but it's here as a side stuff. And this mission, it's got its own story, it's good, which links into the main campaign and relates to the characters. It feels important and significant, but it's completely optional. It's then also got like its own big set piece. It's got one of them things where they train astronauts and it spins round and round and round. Well, you end up in that room and then it's spinning round and round and round. You've got to get into the middle of the room, avoiding this thing while fighting enemies. It's really cool. And because it's optional, this is something that you can totally miss. And there are a bunch of these things throughout the main game where you can stick to the core campaign, just do the main missions as they're presented, but you're going to miss out some huge big set pieces, some cool stuff. And I really like how they've added this stuff in there. As a Gears game, it's got the gameplay, it's the best Gears gameplay there's been because they keep refining it, and there's not much in the terms of new weapons this year, which is a little on the disappointing side. The only new weapons are like, they've got like retro versions of the classic Gears weapons. So for example, you might find like a special version of the Lancer which has a different melee attack, or you'll have a special version of another gun where the longer you shoot, the more powerful the weapon gets, but the less accurate it gets. So they've got like little tweaks to some of the guns that they've got in there, but nothing overall that's new. So that's a bit disappointing. But again, there's such variety in the weapons anyway, so it's not a huge deal, I don't think. But the core Gears gameplay feels refined and it's brilliant. They've added in the side stuff, they've added in the vehicle stuff, and it just works really well, and I think the campaign is brilliant. Some of the revelations about the campaign and what it does to the past Gears story and what it means for the Gears franchise going forward, I think is brilliant. Touching on multiplayer just a little bit, the new mode, Escape Mode, I've played a couple of levels on this. It's tough. Essentially you start off from one location, it's like a maze, you start off with like really basic weapons. You've got to find ammo and weapons. It's very scarce, it's tough because of that, and you're fighting your way out of this enemy location, but you're also kind of being timed because there's a bomb going off which is spreading smoke. It's a really cool idea, and it keeps getting harder and harder the closer you get to the end. I think it works really well. It's not, I think, like the best thing about this game. I think it is a great addition, but I don't think it's going to like unseat Horde mode as like the best multiplayer that this game has to offer. And then of course you have your Horde mode and you've got the much like deathmatch and stuff like that. Very typical stuff, but again I haven't touched too much of the multiplayer. But this is, I think, the best Gears game. The fact that you can get this on Game Pass is brilliant because it means, hey, for like, if it's on special offer you can get it for like £1. You can play this game in its entirety for £1 for like a month or whatever it is. And if not, then you're talking £8. It's still, this is a £60 game which you can play for next to nothing, essentially. So yeah, don't skip this game. I would say if you've never played a Gears game before, you should probably play the others before you play this, because this is, story-wise, it continues right where the last one finished off. But yeah, I love this game, one of my games of the year. I don't think it is my game of the year, but it's definitely up there, maybe in the top 3. Grindstone. So Grindstone is an Apple Arcade game. I do think it's coming to the Switch. I could be wrong about that. But it's kind of like in the vein of like Candy Crush, but there's a bit more to it in that you are like this Viking warrior guy who's clearing out dungeons and tombs and caves and so on. And essentially, there are different monsters in these caves and dungeons, whatever. They're different colours. You can chain up attacks, so if there's a bunch of yellow enemies, you can go from yellow, 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 all the way through and chain up a bunch of them, and you can only attack them in the certain colours that they are, unless there's like a stone or a gem thing, in which case you can collect the gem, then switch to a different colour and go through them. And essentially you need to get so many kills in order to leave the level, but there's also levels where there's a chest to collect, or where there's like a special like crowned like boss character to kill. And then they mix it up by having certain characters who can attack you, and the longer you're in the level, the tougher it gets, because the more characters you get who are able to attack you. There are upgrades that you can get like a shield which can block one attack per round. There are like bow and arrow, which means you can target one character in particular. There are certain instances where there are barricades which require you to build up a chain of like 5 attacks before you can break through it, and certain enemies where you need to have like 5 kills before you can kill that enemy. So a lot of variety in there. It ups the challenge constantly, but one of the things is this is just a really fun, addictive game. It's probably the game I would recommend most if you're going to try out Apple Arcade, and yeah, really fun. Good visuals as well, great soundtrack and score, very addictive. Not much more to say than that. Final game I'm talking about is a game that I've just started playing a few days ago, The Outer Worlds. So Outer Worlds from Obsidian, this is essentially a cross between like Fallout and BioWare's like Mass Effect games. It's an RPG, you create your character, you're on like the outskirts of the galaxy, the Outer Worlds, and the whole goal here is a scientist wakes you up from like cryo freeze or whatever in order to, and he's a criminal basically, and he sets you off on this planet, but in order to save the rest of the people who are in cryo freeze, you got to go on this big quest. And like a Mass Effect game, you pick up companions along the way. There's RPG stuff, so there's side missions. It's not an open world game. There are a bunch of like hub worlds instead where they are somewhat open, but it's not like, right, go over this hill and you'll discover something. You find everything right there from word go. And everything on the map is there for a reason. So if there's a building that you come across, chances are there's going to be a mission that has you go to that building. So there's no real incentive to explore the game before the game wants you to go to a certain location. But I feel like this is a game that's like 2 or 3 years too late. In that, graphically wise, I don't think it's that good looking. Gameplay wise, I think it's a little rough around the edges. It works perfectly fine. I didn't have many, if any, glitches. In fact, for like a game of this style, you expect tons of glitches because that usually happens. But no, it's actually pretty well polished. The problem is that the first person mechanics of the game, I don't think are that good. I don't think I had fun shooting people. There are certain upgrades for certain weapons which I think add to the funness of it. So for example, I got a gun that once I added an upgrade to it, it then disintegrated enemies, and it felt like every shot I was doing was actually doing something. Whereas when you first start the game off, the handgun that you get feels like it's doing nothing. So that's disappointing. Where the game does shine is in its like the talking stuff, the more RPG character development stuff. That stuff is classic RPG where you get a bunch of options and you pick one and that's how you have a conversation with someone. You can totally talk your way out of certain combat encounters or certain missions and certain situations, so it works that way on. What I really like about this is that there could be like an option where you make a joke or you present yourself as an idiot. The characters then react to that. So this game changes how the characters in the world treats you based on what you say to them and what you do, and that's really well done. The big problem though is that the story I don't think is that interesting. Thematically and tonally, it's very similar to like Firefly, the TV show. This is essentially Firefly in video game form, so that's for better and for worse. It's got very like Western aesthetics about it all. The problem though is that I think it starts off pretty well, but then it gets into pretty generic science fiction Western kind of stuff, where there's like one of the first main missions you encounter is essentially just a remake from a mission in Fallout 3, where there's a town with a power source that you need to power your ship, There's also this other rival town with a power source that you need to power your ship. Well, you gotta pick which one you want, and it's very typical RPG stuff. It feels really dated. They're not really doing much new in terms of mission structure in this game. There's a lot of fetch quest stuff. There's a lot of go here, talk to this person, come back, or go here, kill this person, come back. It's very repetitive that way on, and I am going to play more of this game because I am still like just a few hours in, so I feel like there's still more to discover. Maybe eventually it'll truly click in place, but so far the RPG mechanics side of things I think works really well. The fact that it groups different skills into group categories rather than you're upgrading every single skill individually, so I think that's smart. But you can totally play this the way you want. If you want to be more charismatic and talky, you can do that. If you want to be more action focused and so on, you can do that. And there are some interesting sci-fi worlds in here, but again, I don't think there's anything that's like blew my mind. Story-wise, of course, it's also a big thing where it's like talking about corporations and big companies, very relevant today with the whole like Disney taking over Fox and so on, and what's going on in the world right now. But yeah, in terms of the actual core gameplay, the shooting mechanics and so on, and the story that it's presenting, the way that you play the game, the mission structure and so on, it feels a little dated. But it's not bad by any means. So those are the games I've played so far. If you've liked this video, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, leave comments and feedback down below, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at _Grant Burton. Until next time though, thanks for watching.